I discovered a conversation on Jason Carter's phone. He had sent a video of me raising my voice while helping our son with his homework to his female assistant. This was the reason he preferred staying late at the office rather than coming home. The assistant responded with a sad emoji. "Mr. Carter, you really have it tough, working so hard then coming home to this?" That morning, like every morning, I was the first to wake up. I shook Ethan gently, helping him get dressed for school. Meanwhile, Jason sat on the toilet, scrolling through his phone, completely unbothered. "Can you warm up a couple of slices of toast for Ethan?" I asked while struggling to get our sleepy son out of bed. Jason mumbled something incoherent, still glued to his screen. When I finally got Ethan up and made my way to the kitchen, I was met with the sight of an empty toaster and a sink overflowing with dishes from the night before. The summer heat made the leftover food scraps stink, filling the air with an unbearable stench. I called Jason. "You didn't wash the dishes, and you didn't heat up the toast either." His response was lazy and dismissive. "I was too tired last night. I'll do it when I get home." "I have an early meeting today. I don't have time to go out and buy breakfast for Ethan," I argued. No response. "Jason?" The call had already ended. After dropping Ethan off at school, I sat down at my laptop to work on an article. 3 years ago, I had become a full-time housewife. My mother-in-law was elderly and refused to move in with us, so my husband expected me to stay home and take care of everything. Writing was a way for me to regain a piece of myself. But even after a year of freelancing, I only made a few $100s per month. Jason often mocked me for staying up until midnight, revising articles for such little pay. Is it even worth it? He sneered once. He never understood. Every time I had to ask him for money for household expenses, his response was always the same. "Didn't I give you a couple of thousand last time? How is it gone already?" Those words cut deeper than he knew. Taking money from a man always felt like an act of submission. Even if it was just $300 a month, earning my own money meant holding on to my dignity. I wasn't always a housewife. I graduated from the University of Chicago with honors. Before quitting my job, I had a stable salary, earning over 6 figures a year. At noon, I sent Jason a text. "Will you be working late tonight? The new sci-fi movie is about to leave theaters. Ethan doesn't like this genre, but I'd really love to see it." It took him hours to reply. "I should be home around 7. So I bought tickets for a 7:20 p.m. showing. The theater was only a couple of miles away, close enough to be convenient, far enough to feel like an escape. Since becoming a stay-at-home mom, I could count on one hand the number of times I had gone to the movies. Back in college, Jason and I used to love watching movies together. It was our thing. But things had changed. By 7 p.m., Jason still wasn't home. At 7:10 p.m., I sent him a message. No response. By 7:30 p.m., I canceled the tickets. At 8 p.m., Jason finally walked through the door. I didn't ask him where he had been. I already knew the answer. Emily Carter wasn't always a housewife. Before she married Jason, she had a thriving career as a marketing executive at a well-known firm in Chicago. Her salary was 6 figures, her work was fulfilling, and she never had to rely on anyone for money. She was independent, confident, and in control of her own life. Back then, when she and Jason went out for dinner, she never hesitated to split the bill. When they planned vacations, she paid for half the expenses. She prided herself on being financially equal to her partner, but everything changed after Ethan was born. At first, she planned to take maternity leave for a few months and then return to work, but Jason's mother, Linda Carter, insisted that a child's early years were crucial and that a mother should be present. "A stranger raising your child? Do you really want that?" Linda had asked, her tone sharp with disapproval. Jason agreed. "You don't have to work, Em. I make enough for both of us. Just focus on taking care of Ethan," he had told her. At the time, it seemed like a reasonable decision. Jason's salary was more than enough to support them, and Emily wanted to be there for her son's early milestones. But over time, the financial dynamic between them shifted. At first, Jason gave her a monthly allowance for household expenses, but every time she asked for more money, whether for groceries, Ethan's school supplies, or even a new pair of shoes for herself, Jason would sigh and question why she needed it. "Didn't I give you $2,000 last month? How is it already gone?" he would ask, as if she were a reckless spender. Each time, Emily felt her dignity slip away a little more. It wasn't just the money, it was the way he made her feel like a burden, like she was taking something from him instead of contributing to the household in her own way. She tried to budget carefully, cutting back on things for herself. She stopped buying new clothes unless absolutely necessary. She canceled her gym membership. She even started using drugstore makeup instead of the high-end brands she once loved. And yet, no matter how frugally she lived, Jason's attitude remained the same. Linda Carter didn't make things easier. "I don't understand how you go through money so fast," she said one afternoon as they sat in the living room. Emily bit her tongue. "Groceries are expensive," she explained. "So shop smarter," Linda countered. "I raised 3 kids on half the money Jason gives you, and I never complained." Emily wanted to argue that times had changed, that inflation had skyrocketed, that raising a child today was far more expensive than it was decades ago. But she knew it wouldn't make a difference. Linda had always been critical of her, always making her feel like she wasn't doing enough. "A woman's duty is to keep the home running smoothly," she often said. It was clear to Emily that in Linda's eyes she was failing. The weight of financial dependence pressed heavily on her. She hated the feeling of asking for money, hated how Jason made her feel like she was taking something that wasn't hers. So she decided to change that. She had always loved writing. In college, she had written for the school newspaper. Before she met Jason, she had dreamed of writing a novel one day. So, one afternoon, while Ethan was at school, she opened her laptop and searched for freelance writing jobs. She started small, writing blog posts and product descriptions. The pay was minimal, but for the first time in years, she felt a flicker of hope. She stayed up late working on assignments, carefully crafting each sentence. The first time she got paid, $50 for an article, she felt an overwhelming sense of pride. It wasn't much, but it was hers. But when Jason found out, he laughed. "You're staying up until midnight for what, pennies?" he scoffed. "Emily, you're wasting your time." "It's not about the money, it's about doing something for myself," she argued. "You already have a job, taking care of Ethan, taking care of the house. Why stress yourself out with this?" He didn't understand. He never would. Emily had always been good at ignoring things that made her uncomfortable. She told herself that Jason was just busy, that it was normal for him to be on his phone all the time, that the late nights at the office, the missed dinners, the vague explanations were all just part of his job. But lately it had become impossible to ignore. Jason was glued to his phone. Whether they were sitting in the living room, having dinner, or even lying in bed, he was constantly texting. His eyes flickered across the screen, his fingers moving quickly, and he would smirk occasionally, like he was having a private joke with someone. Emily noticed the way he angled his phone away from her when she walked past. How, the moment she entered the room, he would lock the screen or switch apps. One night, as they sat on opposite sides of the couch, Jason was texting as usual. Emily leaned over slightly, just enough to catch a glimpse of the screen. The name at the top of the conversation read, Megan S., his assistant. Emily tried to keep her voice light. "You've been texting Megan a lot lately." Jason didn't even look up. "It's work." Emily folded her arms. "At 10 o'clock at night?" Jason sighed and set his phone down. "We have a big project coming up. She's handling a lot of the logistics, and I need her to stay on top of things." Emily studied him. His face was unreadable, his tone casual. but something about the way he said it made her uneasy. "I just find it strange," she said carefully, "that you two seem to text more than we talk." Jason let out a sharp laugh. "Oh, come on, Emily. Don't be one of those wives." "One of those wives?" she repeated, her voice growing colder. "The kind who gets paranoid every time her husband talks to another woman." Emily felt her stomach twist. "I'm not paranoid. I just think it's unusual that your assistant texts you this much outside of work hours." Jason leaned back, exasperated. "It's work. That's it. If you don't trust me, that's your problem, not mine." Emily swallowed hard. Maybe she was overthinking. Maybe she was letting her insecurities get the best of her. So she dropped it. For a while. A week later, Jason had another late night at the office. "I have a dinner meeting with some clients," he told her before leaving. "Don't wait up." Emily spent the evening putting Ethan to bed, then curled up on the couch with a book. But she couldn't focus. Her mind kept drifting back to Jason. At 11:30 p.m., he still wasn't home. She grabbed her phone and opened their joint bank account. Jason's name popped up in a recent transaction. The Oakwood Grill, $182.45. Emily frowned. That wasn't the usual steakhouse where Jason took his clients. She did a quick search. The Oakwood Grill was an upscale, intimate restaurant, more suited for date nights than business meetings. Her pulse quickened. She clicked on the details of the receipt. It listed 2 entrees, 2 cocktails, and a dessert. Jason never ordered dessert. Her stomach dropped. The next morning, she casually brought it up at breakfast. "How was your meeting last night?" Jason didn't even look up from his coffee. "Good. Where'd you guys eat?" "Same place as usual." Emily stared at him. "Really? Because I checked our account, and it looks like you went to the Oakwood Grill." Jason's hand froze on his coffee mug. Then, just as quickly, he regained composure. "Oh, right, the client picked a different place last minute." "Who was there?" she asked, her voice steady. Jason took a sip of coffee. "Just the usual group." "So Megan wasn't there?" Jason's expression darkened. "Jesus, Emily, what is this, an interrogation?" "I just find it interesting," she said, forcing her voice to remain calm, "that you forgot where you had dinner, and that the receipt shows 2 drinks and dessert when you never ordered dessert." Jason set his coffee down hard. "Are you seriously checking my receipts now? That's insane, Emily. You're making something out of nothing." Emily swallowed down the lump in her throat. "Then tell me the truth." "I already did," he snapped. "You don't trust me? Fine, but don't sit here digging through my bank statements like some jealous psycho." Emily flinched. Jason grabbed his briefcase and stormed out the door without another word. She sat there for a long time after he left, staring at the untouched breakfast on the table. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that he was telling the truth, that he was just exhausted, that she was reading into things too much. But deep down, she knew. Something was wrong. Emily Carter stood in front of the mirror, smoothing out the fabric of her navy blue dress. It had been years since she'd worn something like this, elegant but not overly formal, just the right amount of effort to make an impression. She adjusted the delicate gold necklace Jason had bought her on their anniversary 5 years ago. Back then, he had surprised her with dinner at an upscale restaurant, telling her she deserved to be treated like a queen. Tonight, she wanted to recreate that feeling. Lately, all their conversations had been tense, filled with accusations and defensiveness. She knew Jason was pulling away, and she didn't want to lose him. Maybe, just maybe, if they could have one night alone, just the 2 of them, away from work, away from responsibilities, they could find their way back to each other. She took a deep breath and walked downstairs. Jason was sitting on the couch, typing furiously on his laptop. He barely looked up when she entered the room. "Hey," she said, offering a small smile. "I made dinner reservations for us tonight, just the 2 of us." Jason glanced at his watch. "Tonight?" "Yeah, I thought it would be nice to spend some time together away from work and everything else." he sighed, rubbing his forehead. Emily, I have a deadline. I can't just drop everything and go to dinner. Her smile faltered, but she tried to keep her voice even. It's just one night, Jason. You've been working late every night this week. I miss spending time with you. Jason exhaled sharply, closing his laptop. I get that, but you're acting like I'm avoiding you on purpose. I have responsibilities, Em. We can go another night. You always say that, she murmured. He groaned, standing up. Jesus, Emily, can we not do this right now? I already have enough on my plate. She bit the inside of her cheek, nodding stiffly. Fine. Another night. But they both knew there wouldn't be another night. That evening, after putting Ethan to bed, Emily decided to go for a drive. She didn't want to sit at home, staring at the walls, replaying their conversation in her head. She ended up downtown, where the city lights glowed warmly against the evening sky. It was a perfect night for dinner and wine, if only she weren't alone. On a whim, she turned down the street where the Oakwood Grill was located. And that's when she saw him, Jason, sitting at an outdoor table, laughing over a glass of wine, and across from him, Megan. Emily's grip tightened on the steering wheel as her chest constricted. The restaurant's golden lighting cast a warm glow over them, making the moment look intimate, almost romantic. Megan leaned forward slightly, touching Jason's wrist as she spoke. He didn't pull away. Instead, he smiled, the same smile he used to give Emily. Emily felt like she had been punched in the gut. Her husband, who had just told her he was too busy for dinner, was sitting at a restaurant with another woman, sharing a meal, drinking wine, looking completely at ease. For a moment she couldn't move. She wanted to storm inside, to confront him, to demand an explanation. But what would that accomplish? He would lie. He would twist it around, make her feel like she was overreacting. Again. Instead, she drove away, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles turned white. The truth was right in front of her. She had just been too afraid to accept it. She was the only one trying to save this marriage. The next morning, Emily sat at her kitchen table, staring at her untouched coffee. Her thoughts were a tangled mess, oscillating between anger, sadness, and the unbearable weight of realization. She needed to talk to someone. She picked up her phone and dialed Rachel. Rachel had been her best friend since college, fiercely loyal, brutally honest. She had seen Emily through every stage of her relationship with Jason, from the honeymoon phase to the slow unraveling of their marriage. Hey, what's up? Rachel's voice was warm, cheerful. Emily took a shaky breath. I think Jason is cheating on me. There was a pause. Then, tell me everything. Emily recounted everything. The late nights, the texts, the lies, and finally, what she had seen last night. When she finished, Rachel was silent for a moment. Emily, she said carefully, I don't want to sound harsh, but are you really surprised? Emily's throat tightened. I don't know, maybe not, but it still hurts. Of course it does. Rachel sighed. But, you've been miserable for a long time. You've been trying so hard to fix something that Jason doesn't even care about fixing. Emily swallowed hard. I wanted to believe we could go back to how things were. But you can't. Tears welled in Emily's eyes. Then what do I do, Rachel? Do I just leave? Do I pretend I don't know? Rachel's voice softened. You deserve better than this, Em. You deserve someone who chooses you, not someone who makes you beg for his time only to turn around and give it freely to another woman. Emily wiped at her eyes. I don't know if I'm ready. That's okay. But promise me one thing. What? Stop fighting for a marriage that only one of you wants. Emily closed her eyes. She had spent so much time convincing herself that if she just tried a little harder, if she was a little more patient, if she made herself smaller and quieter and easier to love, maybe Jason would come back to her. But he wouldn't. Rachel was right. She needed to stop fighting for someone who had already let her go. Emily had always known that Jason no longer saw her the way he used to. But hearing it confirmed, hearing him say it out loud, was something else entirely. It happened on a Thursday evening. Jason was home early for once, but instead of spending time with Emily and Ethan, he locked himself in his home office for a Zoom call with his colleagues. Emily wasn't trying to eavesdrop. She had gone upstairs to grab the laundry, passing by the slightly ajar office door when she heard Jason's voice. Loud, clear, and laced with frustration. God, she just doesn't get it. Every time I come home, she's always on my case about something. Why I'm late, why I don't spend time with her, why I'm on my phone. A chuckle from the other end of the call. Sounds like she needs a hobby, man. You're telling me, Jason scoffed. She used to be fun. Now she's just a boring housewife with nothing better to do than nag me. Emily froze. Her grip tightened around the pile of laundry in her arms as her breath hitched. A boring housewife. She felt like the wind had been knocked out of her. She knew Jason no longer appreciated her. She knew he had been pulling away. But to hear him reduce her to nothing more than a boring housewife, as if she were just another obligation, another annoyance, made her stomach churn. She stepped back before she could hear more. She walked downstairs in a daze, dumping the laundry onto the couch, her hands shaking. She wanted to scream. She wanted to barge into his office and demand to know if this was truly how he saw her. But what would that change? Jason didn't love her anymore. Maybe he hadn't for a long time. Emily sat on the living room couch, staring at the blank TV screen. She thought back to the woman she used to be, before marriage, before Ethan, before she had traded in her independence for a life of grocery lists, meal planning, and waiting for a husband who barely noticed her anymore. She had been ambitious, confident, unstoppable. She had built a career in marketing, climbing the corporate ladder with a sharp mind and a relentless drive, and yet she had given it all up without hesitation, because she had loved Jason, because she had believed in the family they were building together. She had sacrificed promotions and late-night brainstorming sessions for bedtime stories and home-cooked meals. She had chosen them over her. And Jason? Jason had chosen Megan. Or at the very least, he had chosen a life where Emily no longer mattered. Anger bubbled up inside her, hotter than anything she had felt before. She had spent years trying to be the perfect wife, trying to mold herself into whatever Jason needed, supportive, patient, understanding. And for what? So he could laugh behind her back? So he could text his assistant late into the night while she sat alone in their bed? No. She was done. The next morning, Emily woke up feeling lighter than she had in months. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. She had spent so much time prioritizing Jason, prioritizing their marriage, desperately trying to hold together something that he had already let go of. Not anymore. For the first time in a long time, she was going to put herself first. And that started now. She pulled out her laptop, opening her freelance writing profile. She had been taking on small assignments here and there, but she had always treated it as a side project, something insignificant compared to her real job as a wife and mother. Now she was going all in. She sent out pitches to new clients, applied for bigger projects, and updated her portfolio. This wasn't just a hobby. This was going to be her future, a future that didn't revolve around Jason Carter. Emily Carter had always trusted her instincts. For weeks she had felt it in her bones. The lies, the secrecy, the way Jason always seemed to be somewhere else, even when he was standing right in front of her. But suspicion wasn't enough. She needed proof. So she hired someone who could get it for her. The private investigator's name was Mark Reynolds. He was a middle-aged man with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. When Emily met him at a small coffee shop downtown, she felt both nervous and resolute. "You're sure you want to do this?" Mark asked, stirring his coffee. Emily hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "Yes, I need to know the truth." "Fair enough," Mark said, pulling out a notepad. "Tell me everything you suspect." She laid it all out, the late nights, the texts, the dinner receipts, the lies. Mark listened carefully, jotting down notes. Sounds like you already know the truth, he remarked. I need evidence, Emily said firmly. Then I'll get it for you, he promised. For the next 2 weeks, Emily waited. She didn't tell Jason. She didn't change her behavior. She played the part of the unsuspecting wife, all while her heart pounded every time he left the house. Then, on a Friday afternoon, Mark called. We need to meet. I have what you're looking for. Emily's hands trembled as she drove back to the same coffee shop. When she walked in, Mark slid a manila envelope across the table. It's all in there? He said. Emily hesitated for only a second before opening it. Inside were photos of Jason and Megan. Jason with his hand on the small of her back as they walked into a hotel. Jason leaning in close to whisper something in her ear at a dimly lit bar. Jason kissing her in the front seat of his car. Emily felt the air leave her lungs. There it was, undeniable proof. Mark spoke, his voice softer now. I'm sorry. Emily swallowed, her fingers tightening around the envelope. Thank you, Mark. You did exactly what I asked. He gave her a sympathetic nod. What are you going to do now? Emily looked down at the photos one last time. I'm going to confront my husband. That night, Emily sat at the kitchen table waiting for Jason to come home. When he finally walked through the door, he barely glanced at her. Long day? She asked casually. Jason sighed, setting down his briefcase. Yeah, meetings ran late. I'm exhausted. Emily nodded slowly. That's funny, because I have pictures of you at a hotel with Megan. Jason froze. For the first time in weeks, he really looked at her. What? Emily reached for the envelope, pulled out the photos, and spread them across the table. Jason's face drained of color. Where did you get these? He demanded. Does it matter? She shot back. Jason swallowed hard, eyes darting across the images. Then, just as quickly, he regained his composure. Emily, this isn't what it looks like. She let out a sharp, humorless laugh. You're really going to say that, Jason? There are pictures of you kissing her. It was a mistake, he said quickly. It didn't mean anything. Didn't mean anything? She repeated, her voice rising. Jason, you've been lying to me for months. You've been sneaking around, gaslighting me, making me feel like I was crazy for suspecting this. And now you're saying it didn't mean anything? Jason ran a hand through his hair. Look, I screwed up, okay? But it's not like I don't love you. Emily's stomach twisted, she echoed. He had no idea what love was. Emily, please, Jason tried again. We can get past this. I don't want to throw away our family over a mistake. Emily's hands curled into fists. You threw this away, she said coldly. Not me. Jason stepped forward, reaching for her, but she stepped back. For the first time, she saw him for exactly who he was. Not the man she had married, not the man she had built a life with. Just a liar, a coward, a man who had been cheating on her and would have continued to do so if she hadn't caught him. We're done, Jason, she said quietly. His eyes widened. Emily, don't. We're done. And for the first time in years, she felt free. Emily Carter had always thought that if her marriage ever came to an end, it would be after years of fighting, after exhausting every possible solution, after trying until there was nothing left to try. But now, sitting in the office of a divorce attorney, she realized the truth. It wasn't the fighting that ended things. It was the silence. The moment she saw Jason's affair laid out in pictures, the moment he looked her in the eyes and still had the audacity to lie, something inside her had gone quiet. There was no more room for doubt. There was no saving this marriage. The attorney, Rebecca Hayes, was a woman in her late 40s, with sharp features and an air of quiet confidence. Emily had found her through a recommendation from Rachel, who had insisted she find the best. Before we begin, Emily, Rebecca said, folding her hands on the desk, I want to make one thing clear. You are not alone in this. Divorce is difficult, but my job is to make sure you come out of it with everything you're entitled to. Understood? Emily nodded. Understood. Good. Now, let's talk assets. You and your husband own a house together? Yes, Emily confirmed. Both of our names are on the deed. And your financial situation? Emily hesitated. Jason is the primary earner. I left my career to raise our son, so I don't have much of my own income. Rebecca nodded, making notes. That works in your favor. You contributed to this marriage in ways that go beyond money. The court recognizes that. Emily felt a flicker of relief. And what about your son? Rebecca continued. Are you seeking full custody? Yes, Emily said without hesitation. Jason has barely been present in Ethan's life. I don't trust him to put our son first. Rebecca gave a small, approving nod. That will strengthen your case. But I have to warn you, men like Jason, when faced with divorce, sometimes fight for custody just to maintain control. Be prepared for that. Emily set her jaw. I am. She had spent years letting Jason dictate their life, making herself smaller, quieter, easier. Not anymore. That evening, Emily was in the kitchen packing Ethan's school lunch when the phone rang. Linda Carter. She sighed, already knowing what was coming. Hello, Linda. Emily. Linda's voice was sharp. I just got off the phone with Jason. He told me what's going on, and I have to say, I am disappointed in you. Emily let out a bitter laugh. Disappointed in me? Yes. Marriage isn't easy, dear. You don't just walk away because of one mistake. One mistake? Emily repeated, gripping the counter. He cheated on me, Linda. For months. He lied to me every day. Men do foolish things sometimes, Linda huffed. But a good wife forgives. Think about Ethan. Do you really want to break up his family over something that could be worked through? Emily clenched her jaw. This was exactly what she had feared, that people would expect her to swallow her pride, to pretend everything was fine just because it was easier. Jason didn't think about Ethan when he was sneaking around with another woman, Emily said coldly. So don't ask me to. Emily. I'm done, Linda. I'm not staying in a marriage where I'm disrespected and lied to. If you can't accept that, then we have nothing else to talk about. She hung up before Linda could respond. Her hands were shaking, but for the first time, she didn't feel weak. She felt powerful. Jason showed up at the house the next morning. Emily was in the middle of answering emails when she heard the doorbell. She opened it to find him standing there, looking exhausted. We need to talk, he said. Emily stepped aside, letting him in. Jason ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. Look, Em, I know I messed up. I'm not going to sit here and make excuses. But do you really want to throw away everything we've built? Emily crossed her arms. I'm not the one who threw it away. I was an idiot, Jason admitted. But we have a family. We can fix this. We can go to counseling, start over. I still love you, Emily. She shook her head. No, Jason. You love having a wife who takes care of everything while you do whatever you want. That's not love. That's convenience. That's not fair. Emily let out a bitter laugh. Fair? You want to talk about fair? Was it fair when you lied to my face every time I asked about Megan? Was it fair when you humiliated me, made me feel crazy for suspecting the truth? Jason flinched, but didn't respond. I deserve better, Emily continued, her voice steady. And Ethan deserves to grow up in a home where his mother isn't being disrespected every day. Jason's expression hardened. So that's it? You're really doing this? Yes. For the first time since this all started, Jason looked truly shaken. You're making a mistake, he said. You won't find someone who loves you the way I do. Emily met his gaze, unflinching. I'd rather be alone than be with someone who doesn't respect me. Jason opened his mouth to argue, but then something shifted in his eyes. He saw it, the finality in her expression, the certainty in her voice. He knew he had lost. Without another word, he turned and walked out the door. Emily watched him go, her heart pounding. She had fought for this marriage for years, but now she was finally fighting for herself. Emily had prepared herself for Jason's anger. She had prepared for his guilt trips, his manipulations, even his attempts to make her second-guess her decision. But she hadn't expected him to fight for custody, not because he truly wanted to be a full-time father, but because he didn't want to lose. It started with a phone call from her lawyer, Rebecca. Jason has filed for joint custody, Rebecca informed her. And from the way his attorney is handling things, I suspect he's going to push for full custody. Emily nearly dropped her phone. Full custody? She repeated, her voice rising. Jason barely spends time with Ethan as it is. Why would he even want that? It's not about Ethan, Rebecca said. It's about his image. Men like Jason don't want to look like the kind of guy who lost his family. They don't want to be labeled as the absent father who got left behind. Emily clenched her jaw. Of course. This wasn't about Ethan's well-being. This was about Jason's pride. So what do we do? She asked. We build a case. Emily spent the next few weeks gathering evidence. She went through old calendars, documenting every time Jason had missed Ethan's school events, doctor's appointments, and weekends at home. She compiled messages where Jason had ignored her reminders about Ethan's soccer games. She printed bank statements that showed extravagant dinners with Megan while she had been the one buying Ethan's clothes, school supplies, and birthday gifts. She even made a list of the nights Jason had come home late or not at all. And then there was the moment that sealed it, a conversation she had recorded. It had happened just days before Jason officially moved out of the house. Emily had confronted him about Ethan, about how little effort he put into being a father. I provide for him, Jason had snapped. You think throwing money at him makes you a good dad? Emily had shot back. Jason had scoffed. You act like I'm supposed to be involved in everything. He has you for that. I have a career, Emily. I don't have time to play house. She had recorded the whole thing, and in court, those words were going to destroy him. The day of the custody hearing, Emily felt like she could barely breathe. She sat in the courtroom, her fingers gripping the edge of the table as she waited for the judge to arrive. Jason sat across from her, looking composed, confident. His attorney was whispering something to him, probably telling him that Emily didn't stand a chance. But they didn't know what she had. Rebecca leaned in. Are you ready? Emily exhaled slowly, more than ever. Emily Carter sat in the courtroom, her heart pounding against her ribs. This was it, the final battle. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves as she glanced at Jason, who sat across from her with his attorney. He looked polished, confident, like a man who believed he had already won, but he hadn't. Not yet. She adjusted her posture, reminding herself why she was here. This wasn't just about ending her marriage. This was about protecting Ethan. Jason's attorney, a tall man in an expensive suit named Daniel Grant, stood up first. He walked toward the judge with the easy confidence of someone used to winning cases. Your Honor, Daniel began. My client, Jason Carter, is requesting primary custody of his son, Ethan Carter. He believes that, as the primary financial provider, he is better suited to ensure Ethan's well-being. Emily clenched her fists. Furthermore, Daniel continued, flipping through a file, we have concerns regarding Mrs. Carter's ability to provide a stable home environment. She has been unemployed for several years, relying entirely on my client's income. There is also evidence that she has been acting erratically, including hiring a private investigator to follow Mr. Carter, which demonstrates a pattern of paranoia and instability. Emily's nails dug into her palm. Jason was actually trying to paint her as the problem, as if she hadn't spent years raising their son while he was out with another woman, as if she hadn't been forced to hire a PI because he had spent months lying to her face. Rebecca, her lawyer, placed a reassuring hand on her arm. Let me handle this, she whispered. And with that, Rebecca Hayes stood up. Your Honor, Rebecca began, Mr. Carter may claim to be the primary financial provider, but money alone does not make a good father. She picked up a folder and pulled out a document. Let's discuss involvement. Here is a record of every school event Ethan has had in the past 2 years. Soccer games, parent-teacher conferences, holiday performances. Mrs. Carter attended every single one. Mr. Carter? Not once. Jason shifted uncomfortably in his seat. We also have documentation showing that Mrs. Carter has been Ethan's sole caregiver, Rebecca continued, flipping to the next set of files. Doctor visits, bedtime routines, emotional support. These are the things that make a parent, Your Honor, not simply writing a check. She paused for effect, then reached for her final weapon. Lastly, I'd like to present Exhibit C, a recorded conversation between Mr. Carter and Mrs. Carter, in which Mr. Carter states, and I quote, "I don't have time to play house." Jason's face turned pale. Rebecca pressed play. The courtroom filled with Jason's own voice. "You act like I'm supposed to be involved in everything. He has you for that. I have a career, Emily. I don't have time to play house." A heavy silence followed. The judge turned to Jason. "Mr. Carter, do you have a response?" Jason opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time in this entire process, he looked like a man who realized he was losing. The judge leaned forward, flipping through his notes. "I've reviewed the evidence, and it is clear to me that Mrs. Carter has been the primary caregiver in this child's life," he said. Emily held her breath. "Therefore, I am awarding primary custody to Mrs. Carter, with Mr. Carter granted visitation rights." Jason slammed his hands onto the table. "This is ridiculous." The judge shot him a sharp look. "Mr. Carter, sit down." Jason's lawyer whispered something to him, trying to calm him down, but the damage was done. "Additionally," the judge continued, "Mr. Carter will pay monthly child support, the amount to be determined based on his income." Emily felt her entire body sag with relief. She had won. Jason stormed out of the courtroom the moment the hearing was over, refusing to even look at Emily. She didn't care. As she stepped outside, the afternoon sun hit her face warm and bright. She closed her eyes and inhaled deeply. It was over. She was free, and for the first time in a long time, she could finally breathe. Emily Carter stood in the middle of her new apartment, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, and took a deep breath. It still smelled unfamiliar, like fresh paint and new beginnings. For the first time in years, the space around her was entirely hers. No Jason, no tension in the air, no waiting up at night for a husband who never came home. Just her and Ethan. Just freedom. "Mom, where does this go?" Emily turned to see Ethan standing by a box labeled Toys, holding up his favorite action figure. "Wherever you want, sweetheart," she said with a smile. Ethan grinned and ran off to his new bedroom, excited to arrange things the way he wanted. Their old house had never really felt like her home. It had always been Jason's house, his rules, his money, his way. But this apartment, this was a place she had chosen. A place where no one could make her feel small. She walked over to the kitchen and opened the fridge. It was mostly empty, just some milk, juice, and a bottle of wine Rachel had gifted her as a congratulations on your divorce present. She would have to do some grocery shopping later, but for now, she let herself enjoy the quiet. No more walking on eggshells, no more waiting for the other shoe to drop. She was free. Later that night, after Ethan had fallen asleep in his new bed, Emily curled up on the couch with her laptop. She had already taken the first step, leaving Jason. Now, it was time for the second step, rebuilding herself. She opened an email from the Chicago Writers' Workshop, a program she had been eyeing for months. She had been hesitant to sign up before. Jason would have scoffed. "Why waste your time on that? It's not like you're going to make real money from writing." But Jason's opinion didn't matter anymore. She clicked enroll without hesitation. The moment she did, something inside her shifted. It was a small step, but it was hers. Emily stepped out onto the small balcony of her apartment, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. The city lights twinkled in the distance, the hum of traffic below a comforting reminder that life kept moving forward. She took a sip of wine and exhaled. For so long she had been afraid of this moment, afraid of what life would look like without Jason, afraid of starting over. But now that she was here, she realized something. She wasn't afraid anymore. She was finally free. And for the first time in a long time, she was happy. Emily Carter had always known that raising Ethan alone wouldn't be easy, but knowing it and living it were two very different things. The first few weeks in the new apartment were chaotic, between setting up their new home, juggling freelance writing gigs, and making sure Ethan adjusted to the changes. Emily barely had time to breathe. Mornings were the hardest. Getting Ethan ready for school alone, packing lunches, making sure he didn't forget his homework. It was all on her now. There was no Jason to pick up the slack. Not that he ever had before. But there had been a time when she could at least pretend she had a partner in this. Now it was just her. And as exhausting as it was, she preferred it that way. At least now she didn't have to wait up for someone who would never come home. At least now she wasn't constantly questioning whether she mattered. At least now she was in control. But that didn't mean it was easy. "Mom, when is Dad coming to visit?" Emily froze at the question. Ethan sat across from her at the dinner table, poking at his spaghetti with his fork, eyes downcast. She had been dreading this conversation. "I don't know, sweetheart," she said gently. "Your dad has a busy schedule." It wasn't a lie. Jason had barely made an effort since the custody ruling. But she could see the disappointment in Ethan's face. "Does he not want to see me?" The question nearly shattered her. "Of course he does," she assured him. "He loves you very much." Ethan didn't look convinced. Emily reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "I know this is hard," she said softly, "but I promise, you're not alone. We're going to be okay." Ethan gave her a small nod, but the sadness in his eyes lingered. And Emily, no matter how much she knew she had done the right thing, still felt guilty. The phone call came 2 days later. Emily saw Linda Carter's name on the screen and almost let it go to voicemail, but she knew if she didn't pick up, Linda would just keep calling. She sighed and answered. "Hello, Linda." "Emily." Linda's voice was sharp, as always. "I heard Ethan has been asking about Jason." Emily closed her eyes, already bracing herself. "He misses his father," she admitted. "That's normal." "It wouldn't be an issue if you hadn't ripped him away from his family," Linda snapped. Emily clenched her jaw. "I didn't rip him away from anyone. Jason made his choices. I made mine." "Marriage isn't something you just quit when things get hard, Emily," Linda continued. "You had a responsibility to Jason, to Ethan, to hold this family together." Emily let out a bitter laugh. "Jason had a responsibility too," she shot back, "like staying faithful. Like respecting his wife, or did that part not matter to you?" "Men make mistakes," Linda said dismissively, "and women are just supposed to forgive them, right?" Emily bit out. There was a long pause. Then Linda's voice softened, just enough to make Emily wary. "Think about Ethan, Emily. Don't you think he deserves to have both parents under one roof? Do you really want him growing up in a broken home?" Emily closed her eyes, inhaling sharply. "Ethan's home isn't broken, Linda." "It is without his father," Linda pressed. "No," Emily said firmly. "It was broken when I was miserable, when I was waiting every night for a husband who didn't love me. It was broken when Jason betrayed me over and over again. That's not a home. That's a prison." Just Linda was silent. "I'm not going back, Linda," Emily said, her voice unwavering. "Not for Jason. Not for you. And not even for Ethan, because the best thing I can do for my son is show him that his mother is strong enough to walk away from a man who didn't respect her." Linda exhaled sharply. "You'll regret this, Emily," she said coldly. "No," Emily said. "I won't." And this time, she meant it. Emily Carter had spent so long doubting herself that she almost didn't recognize the feeling of accomplishment when it finally arrived. For years, she had measured her worth through Jason's eyes, through his approval, his validation, his financial support. But now, for the first time in a long time, she was standing on her own. And it felt good. It started small. A few more writing gigs here and there, short blog posts, product descriptions, marketing content, the kind of work that wasn't glamorous but paid the bills. Then came the email that changed everything. Subject: freelance feature opportunity. Emily's hands trembled slightly as she opened it. Dear Miss Carter, we came across your recent articles and were impressed by your style. We're looking for contributors for an upcoming feature series on women starting over after major life changes. Would you be interested in writing a personal essay for our magazine? Emily reread the email 3 times, hardly believing it. She had sent out pitches before, but she had never expected them to come to her. Her first instinct was doubt. Why would they want to hear my story? But then she thought about the past year, the late nights spent writing, the endless self-doubt, the struggle of rebuilding herself from nothing. Maybe that was exactly why they wanted her story. So she took a deep breath, sat down at her laptop, and started typing. A month later, Emily sat in a cafe flipping through the latest issue of Modern Women magazine, and there it was. Her name, her article. Breaking Free: How Divorce Saved My Life, by Emily Carter. She ran her fingers over the printed words, her heart swelling with something she hadn't felt in a long time: pride. She had done this. Not Jason. Not anyone else. Her. And for the first time in years, she no longer felt like the woman Jason had once dismissed. She was something more, something stronger. With the magazine feature came more opportunities. Editors started reaching out. Clients started offering higher pay. Her name was gaining recognition in the industry. For the first time since leaving Jason, she wasn't just surviving. She was thriving. She sat at her desk one evening, staring at her bank account balance. And then she did something she had been waiting months to do. She opened the alimony payments tab and canceled them. Jason's money had been a safety net, but she didn't need it anymore. She was finally standing on her own 2 feet. And nothing had ever felt better. Jason Carter had always assumed that Emily would never truly leave him. Sure, she had gone through with the divorce, taken Ethan, and moved out, but in his mind, she was still his Emily. The quiet, dependable wife who had once built her entire life around him. The woman who would always be waiting. But the woman he saw now? She was someone else entirely. It started with a magazine article. Jason had been scrolling mindlessly through his phone when a familiar name caught his eye. Breaking Free: How Divorce Saved My Life, by Emily Carter. He frowned, his stomach twisting as he clicked on the link, and then he started reading. It was all there. Not just the story of a woman who had left her marriage, but a woman who had rebuilt herself. A woman who had taken back her independence. A woman who no longer needed him. Jason clenched his jaw as he scrolled through the comments beneath the article. This was so inspiring. Thank you for sharing your journey, Emily. Your strength is incredible. Wishing you all the success in the world. I just left my toxic marriage, and reading this gave me so much hope. You're amazing. Jason set his phone down, gripping the edge of his desk. He had spent the past few months telling himself that Emily would eventually realize she had made a mistake, that she would struggle without him, that she would come back. But instead, she was thriving. And for the first time, he felt something he hadn't expected: regret. 2 days later, Jason picked up his phone and dialed Emily's number. She didn't answer. He tried again. Voicemail. Frustration simmered in his chest. She was ignoring him. He wasn't used to that. So he sent a text instead. Jason, hey, I was hoping we could talk about Eth. That at least got a response. Emily, what about him? Jason exhaled. She was being short with him, distant. He needed to fix that. I just feel like I haven't been as involved as I should be. I miss him. There was a long pause before her reply came. Emily, you've had months to be involved, Jason. You chose not to be. Jason ran a hand through his hair. I want to change that. Can we meet? He waited. Finally, she responded. Fine. Tomorrow, noon. The coffee shop on 5th. Jason let out a breath. This was his chance. Emily was already at the cafe when Jason arrived the next day. She looked different. Her hair was pulled back in a way that made her look sharper, more confident. There was a quiet ease about her, a self-assurance he had never seen before. For the first time, Jason felt nervous. He slid into the seat across from her. "Thanks for meeting me," he said. Emily simply nodded, her expression unreadable. Jason cleared his throat. "Look, I know I haven't been the best father, or the best husband." Emily arched an eyebrow. "That's an understatement." He swallowed. I've been thinking a lot about things. About us. And I realize now that I took you for granted." Her gaze didn't waver. "I was selfish," Jason continued. "I see that now, and I want to fix things. I want to be there for Ethan, and maybe in time we can—" "No?" Jason blinked. "No?" Emily leaned forward, her voice calm but firm. "You don't get to walk back into my life just because you finally realized what you lost." Jason clenched his jaw. "Emily, come on. We had a life together, a family. Don't you at least—" "Don't," she cut him off. "Don't try to rewrite history. You chose to betray me, Jason. You chose to lie. And now that you see I don't need you anymore, you suddenly want to make things right?" Jason exhaled sharply. "I still care about you." Emily smiled. Not the warm, affectionate smile he had once known, but a knowing, almost pitying one. "You don't care about me, Jason. You care about control. You care that I moved on without you." Jason opened his mouth to argue, but Emily stood up, sliding a few bills onto the table for her coffee. "I'm glad you want to be a better father, but that's all we'll ever be to each other now, co-parents." She picked up her bag. "Goodbye, Jason." And just like that, she walked away. Jason sat there, staring after her, feeling something he had never expected. Defeated. Emily Carter had never considered the idea of dating again. Not seriously, anyway. Even though months had passed since her divorce, she still carried the weight of everything Jason had put her through. The lies, the betrayal, the slow erosion of her confidence, it had all left scars, ones she wasn't sure would ever fully fade. She had built a life for herself now, one that was hers and hers alone. She had Ethan, her writing career, her own apartment. She was happy. She didn't need a man. But then she met Mark Reynolds. It started out as something simple. Mark was the private investigator she had hired months ago to uncover Jason's affair. Their professional relationship had been straightforward. Emily hired him, he got her the proof she needed, and that was that. She hadn't expected to run into him again. But fate had other plans. One afternoon, Emily was at a bookstore downtown, browsing the nonfiction section, while Ethan sat on a nearby bench reading a comic book. She was flipping through a book on investigative journalism when a familiar voice spoke beside her. "That one's good, but it gets a little dry," and she turned, surprised to find Mark Reynolds standing there, holding a cup of coffee. "Mark?" He gave her a friendly smile. "Hey, Emily. Didn't expect to see you here." She glanced at the book in her hands, then back at him. "And yet, here you are, critiquing my reading choices." "It's a bad habit," he admitted with a grin. Something about his presence was easy, comfortable. They ended up chatting for a while, about books, about Ethan, about how Emily's life had changed since the divorce. And when she finally left the store, she realized something surprising. She had enjoyed talking to him. Over the next few weeks, they kept running into each other, at the coffee shop near her apartment, at the park where she took Ethan on weekends. At first, Emily thought it was just coincidence, but then Mark casually mentioned that he had recently moved to a new office nearby. "So you're stalking me now?" she teased. "Absolutely," he joked. "It's all part of my PI training." She laughed, and it felt good. It had been a long time since a man had made her laugh. But still, she hesitated. Mark was kind, patient, and genuinely interested in her, not just as a woman, but as a person. But was she ready? She had spent so much time learning to be independent again. What if letting someone in meant losing herself all over again? She wasn't sure if she could risk that. One evening, as she was locking up her apartment, she found Mark standing outside, holding a small brown bag. "I was in the neighborhood," he said casually, "and I remembered you mentioned how much you love blueberry muffins. So I figured, why not?" She blinked, caught off guard. It was such a small gesture, but it meant more than she could put into words. "Thank you," she said softly, accepting the bag. Mark hesitated for a moment, then spoke. "Emma likes spending time with you. No pressure, no expectations. Just, when you're ready, I'd like to take you to dinner." She looked at him, really looked at him, at the kindness in his eyes, at the patience in his expression. This wasn't Jason. This was different, and for the first time, she thought maybe she could take a chance. Maybe she could trust again, so she smiled. "I think I'd like that." Emily Carter sat on the small balcony of her apartment, a cup of tea in her hands, watching the sunrise. The city stretched out before her, bathed in soft golden light. It was peaceful, quiet. For the first time in years, she felt truly content. She had spent so long thinking that happiness was something you built around another person, around a marriage, around the idea of a perfect family. But she had been wrong. Happiness had been inside her all along. She had just needed to claim it for herself. "Mom, look at this!" Emily turned to see Ethan running toward her, holding up a drawing. She smiled as he proudly displayed his latest masterpiece, a colorful picture of their apartment with him, Emily, and their cat, Oliver, standing out front. "This is us?" she asked, pointing to the figures. "Yeah," Ethan grinned. "And look, I drew a big sun because we're happy now." Emily's chest tightened. "We are happy, sweetheart," she said, pulling him into a hug. And they were. Ethan had adjusted to their new life beautifully. He still saw Jason on scheduled weekends, but he no longer lived in a home filled with tension and unspoken resentment. He laughed more, smiled more. He was growing up in an environment where love wasn't something painful or complicated. It was simple, honest, healthy. Emily's freelance writing had flourished beyond anything she had expected. She was no longer just scraping by, she was thriving. Her latest article had gone viral, and she had been invited to speak at a women's empowerment event about her journey. People cared about her story. She wasn't just Jason Carter's ex-wife anymore. She was Emily Carter, a writer, a mother, a woman who had built her life from the ground up. And she was proud of it. Mark Reynolds had become an unexpected but welcome presence in her life. He didn't rush her, didn't push. He simply existed beside her, giving her space to breathe, to heal, and over time she realized she wanted him there. Not because she needed him, but because she chose him. And that made all the difference. That evening, Emily stood in front of the mirror, brushing her hair before bed. She studied her reflection, not searching for flaws, not comparing herself to the woman she used to be. Just looking. And for the first time in a long time, she loved what she saw. She turned off the light, crawled into bed, and let out a deep, satisfied sigh. She had once feared that leaving Jason would leave her with nothing, but instead it had given her everything. A life that was hers, a happiness that no one could take away. She smiled to herself, knowing, finally, truly, that she was free.